I'm Linnea Hubbard, and on May 11th, 2023, I had the opportunity to chat with Harley Whitehead, a logistical support volunteer from the UK, about his experiences over the last 15 months in Ukraine.
Yeah, so my name's Harley Whitehead, and I'm from the UK, Lancashire, and I'm a volunteer, frontline volunteer in Ukraine, providing logistical support and EOD support to other volunteers and Ukrainian forces.
So just to clarify what logistical support means, that's moving things from a source country to Ukraine or to and from different groups within Ukraine?
Yeah, so for example, radios is quite a big thing for me. So we provide the radios for the battlefield. So we get them from a supplier. I take them to be encrypted, and then take them myself to the front to make sure they get to the right place.
Do you just have a guy who encrypts things?
Yeah, so there's a guy. He's like we have one guy in Lviv, and then we've got another guy in Kiev as well. So yeah, it's pretty straightforward operation for them. So yeah,
That's
we just
awesome.
hang around the office whilst he does his thing.
Oh, so he can do it pretty quickly. Just like pop in and get things encrypted?
Yeah. I mean, we have to give him some notice, just let him know that we're coming, because he has a normal job as well at the side of doing all that. So and I mean, he does everything for free as a volunteer himself. So
Wow.
yeah.
So my understanding is that you were living in Ukraine prior to the large-scale invasion. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I was living in Ukraine from 2019. So I was living in the Kharkiv region and then into Kiev. Yeah, so I was working there as a teacher. Actually, I was a teacher of English. So
What made you want to go to Ukraine to teach English?
yeah, to be honest, we just went there by chance once. It was just we didn't like Poland. We was in Poland and we were pretty fed up of it. And we went to the airport and we just said, like, where's the next cheapest flight out of here? So, and it was £20, which was about $25 to Kharkiv. So we went to Kharkiv and then, yeah, I just loved the place. You know, we met some good friends, and then it was a case of, you know, we kept going back and meeting friends, and then eventually, you know, I just wanted to stay. So, yeah, that's the story.
Was it easy to just start teaching in Ukraine?
Yeah, I had to do some courses and things, but I mean, the need for native English speakers was always quite high. I mean, you know, a lot of people want to, even though I've got a northern accent, you know, I probably don't sound like your normal British guy off the Hollywood TV. You know, a lot of people want to learn from a native speaker, and they will actually pay that extra as well to learn. So I got a job with quite a decent company as well, which was quite well paid for Ukraine. So yeah, it was worth staying around for.
And did you have to learn Ukrainian to teach there, or even just to like get by day to day?
Yeah, no, I didn't have to learn anything. I mean, to be honest, Kharkiv is quite a good city in terms of English speaking. It is and was probably before the war. I think it's fair to say it was a quite Russian speaking city.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't hear anybody in the whole time that speak Ukrainian. So English language there is quite good. There's a few clubs, and there's actually a bar which you can actually only speak English in. So yeah, it's quite popular as well. Yeah, so it's English speaking. Everyone speaks English and practices in Kharkiv. So yeah, it was always okay in terms of getting by and stuff. And to be honest, I did learn some basic Russian as well. So just to get myself by, and I had plans and stuff to travel in Central Asia and places like that afterwards anyway. So I think learning Russian was always part of the agenda anyway, even after Ukraine and stuff. So yeah.
So for any listeners who aren't super familiar with the map, Kharkiv is quite close to the border with Russia. Were you in Kharkiv when the full-scale invasion started?
No, what happened is that I came back to England for 4 days, and I was due to go back to Ukraine on the Friday. I flew back on the Monday night back to England, because I have a daughter, you see, who obviously maintain contact with me. She's 10. So I flew back here for 4 days, and during that 4 days, that's when the invasion started.
Oh.
Yeah, it was like a case of being in England. You know, I woke up to a message. Turn on the news. I turned on the news, and it's like helicopters flying over Kiev, and I'm like, what's going on? Literally, I was there like the day before yesterday, sort of thing. So it was, yeah, it was just all a bit of a surreal moment for me, really, to watch, my home at the time, because at the time I was actually living in Kiev, so when the war started. So yeah, it was crazy. So we just kind of, got a bit shell shocked by the whole thing and the media, and eventually I think I landed back in Ukraine on the 3rd of March. Everyone wanted to do something to help, and everyone in England was like, talking about what was going on and finding ways to help. And I had a van here, so I just drove a van full of supplies over. Yeah, that was the start of everything for us.
Before that, did you think the invasion was for sure going to happen? Or was it more like it's bluster?
No, no, I think we all just thought it was never going to happen, or we actually thought that if it was going to happen, it would just be Donbass and Luhansk. I mean, to be honest, I was actually doing some photography a few days before for one of the English newspapers, because I did a bit of photography, and they actually reached out and said, "Do you fancy covering this demonstration in Kiev?" And there was like 20 something thousand people in Kiev doing the demonstration. That was only a couple of days prior to the invasion, and um, yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody really thought that it happened, and that's me included as well. So yeah, it was quite a surreal time. But some of the other expats who I know, they was obviously stuck in Kiev at the time and trying to get on the train out the country and everything. To be honest, I was the only one who was actually going the other way, So out of everybody that I know personally, anyway. So
Yeah.
yeah, but no, none of the expats that I know from living there are in the country anymore.
Did you have an idea as you were driving your van back to Ukraine what you were getting yourself into or like what you would do to help? Or was it more like pack the van and see what happens?
Yeah, it was a case of pack the van and see what happens. And I mean, we kind of just made contacts as we went along. I mean, there was a lot of people obviously who had similar agendas to us and things like that. And me knowing the country, because I've travelled the whole of Ukraine even prior to the war. I used to get on trains everywhere on my spare time because I was always bored. So whenever I did have any spare days or anything, I always jumped on the train, and I was quite well, drilled when it comes to the geography and kind of, you know, the situation of where the hot areas were as well, what's going to happen, sort of thing. So, yeah.
As a sort of Russian speaking foreigner, did you experience any issues with that after the large scale invasion?
Yeah, it did. Yeah. So, when we first actually went back, we got detained in Lviv, just due to the fact that they'd searched my van. Um, and there was loads of stuff in there. And we'd been searched numerous times already, so I wasn't concerned. And then I had a bag with a laptop in, and I didn't know that there was. They actually told me to stay in the driver's seat, and my passenger, he was showing them the back of the van. And then all I heard was, this is a big problem for you. And then my mate at the time, he shouted, Harley, you better come here. So I've got out of the van, and they've got my laptop back, and there's a Russian dictionary in the bag that I didn't even know was there. Like, I forgot it was even there. I've not even opened that pocket on that bag at this point for about 12 months. So I was like, you know, I didn't know what to do. Anyway, they were all pointing guns at us and everything. And then because I studied construction at university, I had drawings from my quantity surveying classes. So there was obviously building drawings, and they was trying to say that was a bomb and cavity in a cavity and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, we ended up getting arrested for 3 hours. So whilst they went through all our phones, all our laptops, everything, we got
Wow.
arrested. So until I could actually explain, he just didn't understand it. And I think in Lviv, obviously, they're quite patriotic about Ukraine, and it's probably Ukraine's most patriotic city, to be honest. So I mean, Russian language is, it's not always welcome in Lviv. Yeah, so
Wow.
it caused a big problem, man. This guy's got a shotgun up against my chest, and my mate's sat in the van, but he's got an AK-47 pointing at the back of his head. He's not allowed to look anywhere else, and it was like that for 3 hours. And then the SBU came, and the guy spoke better English, to be honest, than the soldier who had the problem. So the SBU came, and after a bit of dialogue and everything was all right. I can't blame them for thinking what they did, because then there was a big problem at that point with saboteurs and stuff as well. There was people, Russian saboteurs as civilians, and all sorts of people coming in and out of the country. So it's probably hard for them to police that as well. So someone with a Russian dictionary and a few building drawings, it's going to be a bit suspicious, isn't it?
It's pretty sus, yeah.
Yeah.
Where did you go from there?
Well, we actually we was working out of Ternopil at the time, because at the time it was more humanitarian aid. So we had a lot of refugees arriving in Ternopil, which is a city in the west near Lviv. The weeks went by. We actually got a base in Zhytomyr, which is about 2 hours from Kiev. So so we was working out of Zhytomyr, trying to get aid into the areas towards Kiev. But obviously at this point, the territory was becoming occupied, so obviously Bucha, Borodyanka, Makariv, all them areas occupied. So it was quite difficult for us to actually make any moves at that point, because we wanted to get to Kiev, but we couldn't. And to be honest, we was quite lucky one day, because one day we did want to go to a place, and to be honest, if it wasn't for Swampy, I don't know if you know who Swampy is, but he's another volunteer. But if it wasn't for Swampy, we probably would have driven into the Russians. So, because he rang me literally 20 minutes before, I was on this road, and it's the Zhytomyr Highway. Everybody knows about what happened on there. But I was on the Zhytomyr Highway, and he basically told me to stop my vehicle now, like, do not go any further. And I was like, okay.
Wow.
He said the Russians are on that highway, and luckily for us, we did actually stop.
Wow.
Yeah, we turned around. So I mean, if that phone call never happened, who knows what could have happened? And they, might have been all right, might have been dead. Who knows?
When you say humanitarian aid, what sort of stuff were you collecting and distributing at that point?
At that point, it was mainly food, dry food, clothes, thermal blankets, just general stuff like sanitation. They were trying to get spare mobile phones and stuff as well, stuff for children and everything at that point. So that was pretty much what we was focused on at that point doing. Because what we had a large van, and we had trucks coming from the UK to the Polish border to meet us. So what we was doing is filling up at the border, coming back into Ukraine, filling up, coming back, and it was every single day. We was flat out. So I think I was driving something like 18 hours a day at that point.
Whoa.
Yeah, so it was crazy. It was like literally 4 hours sleep, and we was back on the road again. Just because the border queues were quite intense as well. But luckily we had like a bit of a piece of paper and a pass, which 9 out of 10 of times got us through the border quite quickly.
You've been saying we. What kind of team did you have?
It was just me and another guy called Stephen. So he was a mate of mine, yeah. So he used to live with me in the UK, come to Ukraine to visit me every now and again when I was living out there. So he just, joined in, and it was just me and him. Yeah, it was a 2-man band. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Do you have any sense of how much aid you guys transported?
Each run was probably around 6 or 7 tons, and we was doing it virtually every day. Like, we was driving stupid amount of hours. So, well into the hundreds of tons, like, when it comes into it, because each lorry was carrying, I think it was 18 or 19 tons of aid. So, and we was clearing a lorry like every 3 or 4 days or something. Yeah, it was crazy because what they was doing, they was driving from England, and then the lorry drivers were actually staying on the Polish border, waiting for us to come back and everything. So yeah, it was,
Wow.
it was intense, and it was hard work at that point. It was very very hard work, but I got a lot from it. So it wasn't the case of it being like tough in a sense. It wasn't. It was just tiredness really. But obviously, once you'd emptied the van and you'd done what you needed to do, everything was just like a big weight off your shoulders. And, you were just ready to go again. So, yeah.
How risky was that drive?
Yeah. To be honest, I thought that at that point, it was all right. Actually, it wasn't too bad. It was anything after Jatoma, though. It was at that point. Anything after that was quite risky. There was another time where I was working up in Chernihiv, but that was probably like the most riskiest thing I've ever done, to be honest, in the whole of Ukraine. So, yeah, there was a request coming for some generators for a children's hospital, and I had 5 days to get there. Basically, they asked me if I wanted to do it, and I was like, okay. And basically, these children they weren't gonna live. That's the reality of it. I mean, where they was, it was surrounded with no power. I didn't really ask too many questions either, but all I know is that the aid that we had and needed taking was what was going to save their lives. So somebody rang me. I was in England at this point, just having a 2-week break, and was like, can you do this run to Chernihiv? So I was like, when? It's like, now. This is a Sunday night. It's like, well, these kids have basically got till Friday. Yeah, so that was the situation. And these kids have never left this hospital life. They've lived there the whole life. So yeah, I drove to London, picked up a vehicle, and I drove all the way to Chernihiv, basically. But what happened is that when I was in Kiev, I was told this route was fine. Nobody else could do it though, but this route was fine. This route wasn't fine. This route was very much the grey area. So yeah, it was completely the zero line. So when I drove up to Chernihiv, the roads are getting more empty, and I got to this Ukrainian checkpoint. There was like, you can't go any further. The Russians are that way. So I'm like, I just drove from England. I understood, but at the same time, I was like, I'm here. I'm half an hour away from where I need to be, and they couldn't really understand what I was doing either. Like, no one really spoke English. Yeah. So I give them my passport, and I took my license plates off the vehicle, and I just drove, and I drove into the area which was supposed to be occupied, but it wasn't. It was just like driving into a ghost town. There was nobody there. Like where they said the Russians were, there was nobody there. I was just driving into a town that was just deserted completely. And then when I got to this hospital, I could see people peeking through the windows, when I pulled up, and they was all like, "What are you doing here?" sort of thing. And they was like, come in. And I was like, no, I just dropped the kit off, and I said, I need to go, whilst it's quiet. And yeah, so I went, and we started getting shelled on the way out, actually. So it's been spotted by a drone. Yeah, so that was quite intense. It was just a case of just getting your foot down and keep driving. So the actual vehicle that we've used has still got all the marks from all the shelling and all the holes in the back of the van. Yeah, from the shelling. So yeah, that's here in England now.
That's quite the souvenir.
Yeah, it was quite intense. I mean, to be honest, I was just bothered about the tyres exploding, piece of shrapnel hitting the tyres, which luckily it never happened. But we managed to get out of there, and the Ukrainians were like, I went back to the checkpoint, got my passport. They was all like, what's going on? Where did you go? Like, because even then, I think the communication was really bad at that point. No one was communicating. I think they thought there was Russians there, and there wasn't. The Russians were probably further back than what the Ukrainians thought. But yeah, it was quite intense. It was very intense. But I'll never do that ever again. And I was quite angry actually at the people who sent me, to be honest, because they told me it was all, kosher and everything's fine, and and the reality of it is that they knew that it wasn't fine, and they had nobody else willing to go. So yeah, it was intense. But yeah, I won't be doing that again. We have a bit more things now to communicate and a few more things to study and everything nowadays. So yeah, this was quite early on in the war.
Do you have any, I mean, don't give me specifics, but do you have intel connections now that can help you map a route?
Yeah, completely. Yeah. These days we do. Yeah, so we always communicate with whoever is receiving the goods. We go through and study every single route now, and also times of day is quite important as well. When doing what we do, because obviously we supply kit to the front lines. We're not delivering to Kiev or Lviv or anything. We're going right into the east and the southern front. So yeah, everything needs to be studied properly. And I mean, you can't always predict what's going to happen, but at least you can give yourself the best chance.
That's nerve-wracking, I'm sure.
Yeah, of course. I mean, to be honest, sometimes you gotta remember not to get complacent as well. It's quite easy to get complacent, especially when you're in my position. I mean, I've done, tens of thousands of kilometers, now on the front line. So, I mean, you need to just make sure that you stay focused and make sure that you treat every single task as a new one. And, you can't get complacent, even if you've been there 20 times before. You need to just make sure that you do your job properly. And that's how everybody stays safe, isn't it?
So you started out kind of just doing whatever was at the border, bringing stuff in. Was that mostly for internally displaced persons at that point in time?
Yeah, completely. Okay. Yeah, it was all that. Yeah, and hospitals as well. We were supplying hospitals with medical aid, so obviously there was a massive shortage, and hospitals weren't ready for all this. So yeah.
So from there, from bringing aid to internally displaced persons to then bringing things to the front line, what was that transition like? What was the impetus behind that?
Yeah, needs changed massively, and I mean, I think once we started, we actually just did like a couple of loads for the army. It was just more of a chance basis, and can you do this for us, sort of thing, from an organisation, and then we actually seen how bad and undersupplied the army was. So, and then it's just kind of like transition from there. We met some connections in the army. I already had some friends in the army in a bit of market, so I had a good understanding of what they actually needed and what they were short of. But it was a case of what we could get. So it was a case of me reaching out to organisations who have equipment for the soldiers and who supply that kind of stuff, and then basically offering my services to them. And that's always been a priority for us as well. Is the army, because we always feel like the army actually need the stuff more than the civilians do. If there's anybody who's not got anything out there, it's actually the army. I know they talk about the US and the UK supplying all these billions of pounds of aid packages and stuff. That's missiles and stuff, obviously, which is needed, but the average infantryman is actually hasn't really got much at all. I seen a guy the other week walking around with wooden plates in his plate carrier. He had pieces of wood there,
Oh.
And he's just, that's the kind of thing that you see all the time. And boots and stuff, just basic stuff that they're lacking. You've got the high tech missiles, but they're lacking the basics, really. Yeah.
How much does a plate carrier cost, or the ceramic plates?
I think you'll be looking at level 4. So the plate carrier itself isn't actually that expensive. I mean, you can pick one up for a couple of $100, sometimes even less. I mean, you can get a lot of second-hand ones here in the UK, which people who've left the army sell the kit and stuff, which is a good quality kit. But it's the actual plate itself. You're looking at. I think here in the UK, you're looking at about £400-500 for a plate. So sometimes that's just a one. And that's if you can get it, because there's such a high demand at the minute. Everybody's got backlogs and pre-orders and everything like that. So, it's quite difficult to get stuff, because a lot of the Ukrainians, the ones who have got money, are kind of buying everything anyway. There's an army surplus shop near Manchester, And I was in there one day and I was talking to the guy in there, and he was saying that, there was Ukrainians in London that were driving up every Wednesday in big vans and taking everything that he has coming in stock. He said he wasn't even putting it on the shelves anymore. It was coming straight out of his wagon into their van. He said because that was what was keeping his business going. Business was thriving for him. So it is quite hard to get some decent care of them because it tends to be all spoken for. But we do our best, and we do have contacts as well in Ukraine who can supply us when it's there. So, but yeah, you're in a queue. There's a lot of other volunteers as well who are before you, and that's the thing. So we have a big chat group. You see, people put out requests there. It's difficult. You gotta be fast.
That's kind of impressive, though. It's amazing to think how much more efficient you guys probably are now compared to volunteers like 80 years ago, before there were chat groups.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, and I always say that a lot of the help that was coming into Ukraine, at the start of the war, a lot of people probably didn't have good intentions. There was a lot of people collecting money and goods which never arrived in Ukraine. There's still bits of that going on, but I mean, we are very quick now to spot this sort of thing, and you tend to find now the people with good intentions are the people who are still doing it.
Yeah.
So the people with the bad intentions, they've either packed up because they wasn't getting any more money, or they took all the money, or they've been found out by people like us. Because one thing is that we are good at, we're all good at communicating with each other and vouching for each other and stuff. So yeah, we can kind of see through a lot of people and what intentions they have quite early.
Have you had to deal with counterfeit supplies and equipment?
Counterfeit tourniquets, yeah. There's a lot of fakes going around. So Chinese made fakes, and some of them are actually quite good copies, and until you use it, and then it'll just kind of fall to look at. You'd think, yeah, that's the real deal, but but even me, I'm not really well schooled on how to spot a fake. So if I do come across any more tourniquets or anything, which I've not actually had any for a while, I'll probably send them to Becca. She did say to me, send me some videos and stuff. If you can't get to me, send me some videos, and I can tell you whether it's genuine or not. So we do have that kind of thing, and obviously there's a lot of other people who do the same as Becca and are good at spotting these things. So yeah, if I ever got any tourniquets or anything, I would be straight away. The first thing I do is send the videos just to make sure that we are giving out good quality kit, because it's could kill somebody. So got a lot of people out there, giving out kit that's killing people, and bad advice as well. I mean, there's problems with people saying they were medics and stuff at one point and they weren't, and all that kind of thing, and giving out training even though they I don't know where they got their training from, but there was a problem with that at one point. So I don't know what you call it down your way, but is it like stolen valor or something, like where somebody, I think that's a US term for it, but yeah, people having false credentials sort of thing. So yeah, there's a lot of that going on, but yeah, these people tend to have been found out by now, hopefully anyway.
That's a lot of audacity to fake a medical training program.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So, because I think a lot of the time as well, because a lot of Ukrainians probably couldn't read English and understand English and stuff, and people were turning up with fake certificates and stuff. It was kind of just like, come on board. But I think once they started working in environments with actual professionals and everything, that's when they kind of got found out. That's why I always say it's always best for anyone to be honest. Just be honest. You might not get to do the job that you want to do, but you just got to be honest, because at the end of the day, people's lives are at stake.
And it seems like people are keen to teach things too.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so there's a lot of training courses and stuff provided by other volunteer orgs. A lot of them are free as well. There's a lot of things you can do out there to train and learn, spend some time with organisations. I mean, all organisations will take volunteers, to a degree. providing that you're dedicated and you have good intentions, and you don't have alcohol problems or drug problems.
Was there ever a concern about crossing a legal boundary with what kind of supplies you were taking and where you were taking them?
Yeah, of course, yeah. I think, obviously, for us, it was always non-lethal aid, tactical aid. It's always been non-lethal. I mean, we don't carry guns or anything like that. Even if I had the choice to carry a gun, I probably wouldn't carry one, just for the simple fact that of how much, how much red tape there is and problems it can cause as well. I always get asked, have you got weapons? All the time in the battle. I'm always like, no, but I always think, what would happen if I say yeah? Because are they going to stick the guns up in my face again? Because I've had that. I've had that a couple of times actually. So yeah, I always try and obviously stay within the legalities of things. I mean, sometimes when I'm bringing like infrared and thermal scopes in and stuff, there can be a bit of a problem with they want military paperwork for me to bring it in. So yeah, there's that side, but I always try and work around it if I can. Yeah.
And that's it for part 1. Part 2 will be published in the coming week. Until then, stay safe, everyone.